everybody, welcome to Emily Kate Made This. I am Emily Kate and I'm coming to you from Berlin in Germany. Welcome to my normally knitting channel, vintage knitting, vintage crafting, but as you will have gathered from the title, this episode is all about the National Loaf. This episode is all about bread. I know, very far off my usual content, but it is vintage related because it's World War II and it's the World War II National Loaf. You might be wondering, why am I doing a video about bread? Especially considering I'm usually talking knitting. Well, the reason for that is my knitting mojo has kind of left me momentarily. So I've decided to don some vintage knitwear that I made and do something else vintage relating, baking. I am a big social history fan. I love watching YouTubes on all the things from basically any era. I love learning how people used to live, how they used to bake, how they used to store food, social history, specifically how people lived and made their food. I'm really interested in. So I thought, seeing as I love baking, and I've lost my knitting mojo, I still want to create some videos. Let's merge these two together. So I had this grand plan of making this video very cinematic and marvelous, but I don't know how to do that, so I'm not quite sure where that idea came from. So it's mostly me I'm not donning anything. It's mostly me just filming with my phone, but the process is interesting and I hope you find it interesting. So let us get into this video. I had all these plans of memorizing the small text that I wrote, but I can't memorize to save my life, so I'm just gonna read it from my phone. So you might be asking, why am I doing a video on bread? Well, bread was actually not rationed during the war. Ironically, it was rationed after the war, but it was controlled. You couldn't just buy lovely white fluffy bread that people were accustomed to. Let's read my speech, shall we? During World War II, Britain faced severe food shortages, leading to rationing on almost everything except bread. But in 1942, the government introduced the National Loaf, a wholemeal bread designed to make flour supplies stretch further. It was healthier, but not exactly popular. In this video, I'll be baking a somewhat authentic National Loaf using a wartime recipe. I say somewhat authentic for several reasons. I'm putting a bit of a twist on this. I can't digest wheat, so I will be making this with dinkel, that's German, spelt wholemeal flour instead of wheat. And I will also not be using active yeast or dried yeast. Yeast was rationed during the war and you had to buy it. So I had an idea. I make sourdough bread a lot. Every week I make sourdough bread, but it wasn't typically a thing in World War II. But other things do give yeast. They do, how do I phrase that? Other things provide yeasty bread goodness aside from actually buying a packet of yeast. So I thought I'd do an experiment. I have two experiments I want to try. The first one being fermented potato water. Oh, doorbell. Where was I? Got interrupted by the postman. So yes, I want to try fermented potato water because potatoes were in abundance, so it's easy to ferment potato water. And also, back in the day, I have made yeast water from apples, so I thought I'd give that a go as well. So let us begin the journey. So apparently I lost the footage with any sound recording, so let's just go with this dodgy voiceover. I first got myself a potato. It was actually about 2 small potatoes, and I boiled them up and then I mashed them into their own juices. Welcome to my kitchen of messiness. So this is the potato starter, which my camera does not want to focus on. I'm gonna sniff it and see what it smells like. It just smells like potato water. It's supposed to smell like sour. It does not. Bubbles, 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 bubbles. We have bubbles, but no light. There we go. Nom 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 nom. Smells good. I think I might brave making some bread today. Ooh yeah. So I decided to make a starter and instead of just throwing it straight into the bread recipe. So I did about 50 grams of rye flour and 50 mils of water. As always, trying to do this with one hand. I can't promise it will go very well. It's really dark, even though the light is on, but are you ready to be impressed? Because I'm very impressed. I just had a little sneaky peek and it's alive! I don't know if my camera's picking this up at all because it's dark, but look at all that lovely goodness. So I think we can make some bread. And apparently there's no evidence of me putting these ingredients together, so I will put the recipe down below. But it is a mixture of salt and wholemeal flour and the potato water. Okay, I just took this out of the fridge, so let's see how much it rose overnight. Ooh, look at that! It's perfect. Okay, I'm going to let it come to room temperature, then I will put it in the oven, and then at lunchtime I should be able to tell you what it tastes like. Whoops, that's a bit brown. That one obviously needs a little less time than my usual bread. Let's take it out. Ooh, squishy.
Yeah.
Okay, you can stop touching and squishing it now.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa, that is dense.
Yeah, it's very dense and hard to cut.
Oh, that probably sums up the National Loaf quite well.
Smells.
Of course. Probably not the most realistic meal, having butter, Marmite and a poached egg. But hey, you're allowed one egg. I'm using my 1 egg allowance. Day 2 update.
For the toaster now.
Oh no, it's still quite squishy.
Oh, now that I cut into it.
It's been a very long time since I did this, so I'm just going off of memory here. I should have taken the pips out, but it'll be fine. I'm basically going to leave this bit of apple core and some raisins that I had because I didn't have enough apples. And I've just let them sit in some water and I'll leave them for a day. Then I might, if I go shopping today, get another apple and add a little bit more. And I'll just shake it, and in about 3 days it should be fizzy. It should look very similar to the potato starter over there. So I mixed up 20 ml of the apple and raisin water and mixed it with about 20 grams of flour. And then I will leave it until it grows. Please excuse my air purifier in the background, it's going a bit mad. But here's my apple and raisin water. that I put together, which you should have seen. And I'm not doing very well at recording everything that I'm doing because I typically do it at night and it's dark. But last night I fed 20 grams of flour and it is a bit alive. Woohoo! So I'm going to feed it again, and then I'm going to make another loaf following the same National Loaf recipe but using this raisin and apple water. Isn't it beautiful? That's our starter. Okay, I have my salt in water. I have my starter. I have my more starter, the fluid we need. I have my lard and I have my flour. Let's go. And this is me casually struggling with my starter, but the main thing is if it floats, it's good, and if it sinks, it is bad. It is dead basically, and you have to start again. So as expected, I mixed together the salt and the flour and the lard. That was a new addition, but it was in the recipe, so that went in. Mixed it together, let it rise. I left it in the fridge actually overnight to rise, and then I baked it. It hasn't risen very much, but we'll see. Woohoo! And I haven't really mentioned, but typically in World War II they had the national flour, which was not the same as what we have now. That was more of an 85% extraction, meaning that some of the bran was removed but not all of it. So it's more of an equivalent of 85% wholemeal flour and about 15% white flour. So I added a little bit of white dinkel, white spelt flour. Interesting. Yeah, I think it's safe to say I'll just go back to my normal bread. Welcome back to my kitchen. I thought I would do a little update on how the bread went. So, potato bread. Potato bread it wasn't my favorite. It was kind of spicy. It was very flavoursome. It had a very distinct taste. And yeah, I wasn't a huge fan, to be perfectly honest. I actually only had it, ooh, my tripod's just moving. I had it fresh on the day, and then I had one piece the following day, and it confirmed I'm not a fan. My husband ate the rest. I tried to put it with Marmite, and if you've had Marmite before, you'll know it's a strong flavour. If you haven't, it's a strong flavour, and the bread overpowered that flavour. So that's saying something. So would I make that one again? No. No, I wouldn't. The raisin and apple bread, I expected to turn out better. And I think the problem was, I'm not actually sure, but maybe the ratio of the wholemeal just wasn't ideal. Like, it was too much work for the little bit of yeast. It wasn't like a well-established yeast colony like sourdough, which has a bit more oomph behind it that can help make a loaf better. This one might work out better if I fed the yeast 2 or 3 times. I only fed it twice, so maybe I should say 3 or 4 times. I don't know, I would try it again, but I wouldn't rush to it. I prefer to have my bread mixed with wholemeal, spelt, and the white spelt. The other thing I realised was I added lard, as the recipe says to do. I added lard to it and it made it really soft, which is exactly what it was intended to do, but I don't like soft bread, it turns out. I don't like solid bread, but it was very squishy. It would probably work very well in like a brioche kind of bread, where it's soft and squishy and the sweetness from the apple and the raisin. But in this bread, I wasn't a huge fan. So I started this project as a way to kind of prove to myself almost that the National Loaf didn't have to be as unpleasant as people often say it is. But yes, it's definitely not to my modern palate. I will stand in agreement that I'm not the biggest fan. Admittedly, I think the problems that people had during World War II was that the bread was baked the day before they got it, and so it was actually too hard, it was stale, whereas my problem was that it's become too soft from the lard, and yeah, it didn't rise like my bread would normally rise and have an even distribution of air bubbles. It was just, as you saw in the footage, not the best result. I would try it again, but not in a hurry. So if you would like to try making some bread yourself and using the National Loaf recipe, I'd love to know how you get on. Obviously, water quality and flour, the differences in flour, everything's going to make a huge difference. If I made it in this kitchen and my neighbour made it in hers, it would come out completely different. So let me know in the comments if you have ever made it or if you intend to make a National Loaf. I would be very intrigued. And thank you for coming along on this very off-topic adventure of bread making with me. So I do have another 1940s plan in the making, but yeah, we'll see how it goes. If this video totally crashes and burns and no one has an interest, I won't do it. But if you find this kind of thing interesting and 1940s, 1950s baking and cooking videos interesting, I will continue trying to make them. So thank you very much for watching. Hopefully I will have some more knitting content for you soon, but for now you can just visually take in the vintage knits I have made, and I will see you very soon. Bye! Hi! Just popping in with some actual knitting content because progress and decisions have been made. Thank you everybody who gave me your amazing ideas. I had some crazy interesting ideas on my last episode about what to do with the jumper, the twinset jumper that went wrong because my knitting gauge came out wrong by half a stitch. So we are continuing on the 1940s twinset, but let me see if I can show you. Don't want to lose my ends. I haven't cut it yet, but I have sewn using the sewing machine up here, and I'm going to chop off this excess amount of fabric, and I'm just continuing to knit the jumper. I don't quite know why this didn't occur to me at any point, but alas. So I've now seamed it up there. It'll just be running down one side, and it is still going to be too big, by a little bit too big at the bottom, but I really don't mind. I'm fine with that. I can't show you without cutting my head off, but I have added an extra repeat. It's basically that repeat here. Since I last spoke to you, this is all the knitting I have done. That. Hence why this video is entirely about baking bread and not knitting. But I thought I would update you that the twinset jumper is back on. It's back on the needles. It's back, baby, and I shall be continuing on this one whenever I get the knitting urge. But I think now that that decision has been made, I will feel a lot more easy about picking this up and just continuing to knit. So that's a relief. So yes, back to the baking. National Loaf.